see older science fiction movies as pure films, without the outside effects of the mainstream. This is perhaps what makes them so great. Devising a top 5 science fiction film list is no easy task, but due to time constraints, I just had to stick with the biggest 5. The main criterion for these movies is they have to provide an escape from reality. A lot of people view science fiction as more of the horror genre. We got The Predator, Alien. Those are great movies. They just don't meet my definition of pure science fiction. Which brings me to my next point is, you can't have a definition of science fiction. It's different for everybody. However, I hope that everybody learns something from this list. If you haven't seen these movies that I'm about to show you, then you need to get them. Let's first start off with a brief history of science fiction in the cinemas. Some say that in the 1920s, science fiction in the cinema was born. During this era, science fiction films were typically silent like the rest of the films during this time. Some examples of 1920s science fiction films are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We even got Frankenstein as well. The underlying theme of science fiction during this era was merged with the horror genre, typically depicting of a mutated monster. In the 1930s through 1950s, science fiction was more of a joke in some minds. These films during this era were typically B-rated movies, nothing too spectacular, and they didn't make it much into the mainstream media. During the 50s, space travel was such a big cultural icon, and we saw that science fiction films moved towards outer space, merging the themes of monster plus space during this time period. The Blob, Them, and The Day the Earth Stood Still were some prime examples of films during this time. During the 1960s, science fiction became more realistic. This was, in my opinion, the birth of current science fiction. Stanley Kubrick's 2001 finally brought science fiction into the mainstream. If you don't know who Stanley Kubrick is, he's a natural fucking badass who made movies the way he saw fit. Another famous film of this time period is Planet of the Apes. The whole idea that monsters should revolve around science fiction was officially ended at this time, thank God. The themes were basically philosophical, space travel, and the unknown. This era was the end of jokes and the beginning of realism. During the 1970s, science fiction became less orientated with outer space and more towards social control and technology. This was clearly the sociology period of science fiction. We see many examples from this, such as Westworld, THX 1138, A Clockwork Orange, Soylent Green, and even Future World. This was a great period in science fiction. The 1980s came around with the cyberpunk era. This theme was about the future and how us humans have destroyed it. Blade Runner, Total Recall, and The Terminator are phenomenal movies from this time. Recent science fiction has mainly revolved around computer interface with computer systems malfunctioning. The biggest title arguably in this era is The Matrix. Even though The Matrix was a huge success, sci-fi on the whole fell by the wayside due to the ever-increasement of Hollywoodism that seemingly takes place in most movies. Stay tuned, because after the holiday break, I will show you my number 5.